Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to do a book tag. It has been a really long time since I've done a book tag. I've been wanting to get back into it and this seemed like a really good time to do it. I have kind of a backlog. The one I wanted to start with in getting back into doing book tags is the W is for Writer book tag. This is started by Sean the Book Maniac. He has been doing a series of book tags, letter by letter, not in order. I will link the previous ones down below, and I will link his W is for Writer video. I think I'm so far behind that there is another alphabet soup book tag in this, so that I will have to get to. But let's start with W is for Writer, and I have a giant pile of books to get through here. So let's get into it. I think this is going to be fun. You know, it will be fun. Let's go with that. It's positive attitude, right? We all need it right now. So the first prompt is W is for writer, a writer you have met, know, or have seen in real life. It does not have to be a really famous writer, but should at least have been published. I do not know any writers personally. I have met people through BookTube who have channels, who have published a book, Britta Bowler, Brian at Bookish, and so on. I don't know them personally, but I know them through social media. But I'm going to go with people who I have met through book signings. The first one I would like to talk about is Tina Fey. I went to a signing for Botsy Pants at the Barnes & Noble in Union Square in New York City. I was working in the Flatiron Building at the time, and at 5 o'clock I just raced out of work to get there, and it was already jam-packed for her book signing. I believe David Remnick from The New Yorker was doing the interview with her, and it was already jam-packed. I was one of the last people that they let in, and the top floor of that Barnes & Noble, if you haven't been there, the Barnes & Noble in Union Square, New York City is huge. The top floor was packed. It was just full. So when she came in, she was actually sick, and she was only supposed to, it was the day her book came out, so it was the beginning of her book tour, and she was sick. But so she was only contracted to be there for a certain amount of time, and her agent wanted to get her the hell out of there because she was sick and they had a whole book tour planned. But so the agent was actually talking, or someone from her team, I don't know if it was her agent, was talking to the Barnes & Noble staff in my vicinity after the book signing had gotten really dragged out. And they were saying that Tina Fey needs to go, you need to let these people know. And Tina actually called out from the table, no, I will stay, I'm fine, don't worry about me. So she stayed. I was one of the last people to get my book signed, and I left the store at like 1:30 a.m. So yeah, that part was really cool, but also I love Tina Fey. 30 Rock is one of my favorite of all-time TV shows. It's up there with the Mary Tyler Moore Show for me. That's my top 2 favorite TV shows of all time. So I was really excited. The whole time I was waiting in line, hours, to meet her, I was thinking about, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And by the way, here is her signature in the front of the book. So I was thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And I got up there, and they handed her my book, and she said, "Hi, how are you?" And she paused for a beat, and I froze. Couldn't say anything. I just kind of nodded, and she kind of realized I wasn't going to talk, so she's got her Sharpie out and opened up the book and said, "It's really nice of you to come," and looked at me again expectantly, and I just kind of smiled and nodded, and she's like, "Okay." So she signed the book, puts it down, goes to hand it to me, and smiles and looks expectantly, almost as if to say, this is your moment, kid. What do you want to say? And I just smiled, nodded, and walked away. I blew it. But she was lovely. I'm really glad I have this signed copy of her book. The book is really funny if you have not read it. So she is the natural choice for a writer I have met. Because of the story. So the next book signing that I went to was actually at that same Barnes & Noble, was for Junot Diaz. So really quickly, I was determined not to lose out on a chance to talk to him. I brought The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, but this one is not signed actually. It was for the release of This Is How You Lose Her. There is his signature. I don't know if you can see it. So I was determined not. So I got up there and I kind of desperately just "Thank you for writing your book. I really love your writing." And he was like, "Cool, cool, thank you." And he was not sitting behind a table, he was out standing, so he could actually like interact with you and take pictures with you. So they took a picture of us, but somehow it was on video. So I'm not going to put it in this video, but I have a video of me posing with Junot Diaz, and we just hold the pose for about 2 seconds, and then somebody says, "I think this is on video," and I turned just white as a ghost. I was so embarrassed, but he was really nice about it. He made jokes. So that's my addendum to Tina Fey, who is the actual answer for a writer I have met. Prompt number 2. W is for war, the last great book you read about war, and or just one you want to read, or talk about why you don't read war books. Well, I do read war books. I didn't think too much about this. I don't think I've read a war book that I really liked recently. I'm going with one that I want, is kind of on my TBR. It's trilogy, actually. So I've read Regeneration by Pat Barker, and I really want to read the other 2 books in the series, The Ghost Road and The Eye in the Door. Eye in the Door is the second one, I believe, and Ghost Road is the conclusion to the trilogy, which won the Booker Prize. So these 2 I need to get to, and it's taken me such a long time to get to them that I think at this point I need to reread Regeneration. So Regeneration, I'll do a touch of the blurb. In 1917, Siegfried Sassoon, noted poet and decorated war hero, publicly refused to continue serving as a British officer in World War I. His reason, the war was a senseless slaughter. He was officially classified as mentally unsound and sent to Craig Lockhart War Hospital. There, a brilliant psychiatrist, Dr. William Rivers, set about restoring Sassoon's sanity and sending him back to the trenches. So it's a lot about war and opposition to war. It also, the blurb doesn't cover it, but it deals a lot with homosexuality, and especially homosexuality in the military, obviously. It talks about PTSD in a time when it was really only known as shell shock and not really understood at all. It's a fascinating book. I really love it, so I want to reread it and then get to the other 2 books in this series. I think it's just a deeply humane look at war and the difficulties of it, and the casualties, and how difficult it can be. So really want to get to the rest of the trilogy. Prompt number 3, W is for www.writer.com. A writer you recommend or want to read whose first and or last name starts with a W. Bonus points for first and last name. I'm not doing bonus points. And I'm going to go with somebody I want to read. So I have never read Night by Elie Wiesel, even though it's a really, really tiny, tiny book. That's because of the subject matter. It is supposed to not be a very happy book, but I really need to get around to reading it at some point. So I have to acknowledge I need to read this book. And another author is Edith Wharton. I have read The Age of Innocence, and I really loved it. So much so that I listened to it on audio, and I ran out and bought a copy just so I would have a copy on my shelves. It's really good. If you haven't read it, what are you doing with your life? Read The Age of Innocence. And then I really want to read The House of Mirth. I picked up this copy of a Dover Thrift Edition for $1 at my local used bookstore. That's not, Dover Thrift Editions are thrifty. It's right there in the name. But this one was originally $5 and is now $1, and I really need to get around to reading The House of Mirth. God, I love Edith Wharton, and I need to read more of her. Prompt number 4. W is for Wait and See, a book or writer you are not ready to try yet, and why. Well, I'm going to talk about 3 writers here. The first one is Marcel Proust. I am possibly going to force myself to read one of his books this year as part of my Read Outside Your Comfort Zone challenge. I've heard his books are really long, they're really dense, very complicated, and that's why I have stayed away from them. I'm telling myself I should read one for my Read Outside Your Comfort Zone challenge. Oh, I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. I would love to say that I've read a Proust so I can actually have an opinion on the matter. Will it happen? I don't know. James Joyce, basically the same thing. I feel like the obvious choice for James Joyce is Ulysses, which is a legendarily difficult book. But if I were going to read James Joyce this year, I would probably read The Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. it's supposed to. I believe that's supposed to be a more accessible book. Will I get around to it? Both of those are on my list because of the Read Outside Your Comfort Zone challenge. I don't know if I will get to them. The other one I'm going to mention, which I actually own copies of the books, is John Updike. I have Rabbit Run, Rabbit is Rich, Rabbit Redux. He is on my list because I feel like I can't say I'm well-read or a well-rounded reader unless I have read John Updike. He's a classic writer of the late 1900s. He won 2 Pulitzer Prizes, which is another reason he's on my TBR. As part of my Pulitzer Prize project, I'm going to have to eventually read him. And I feel like if I'm going to read the 2 that won a Pulitzer, I might as well just read the whole Rabbit series because both of his Pulitzer Prizes came for Rabbit books. Basically, I feel resistant because I feel like John Updike seems like a complicated person. I've heard there's a lot of misogyny in his books, and it seems kind of indicative of the very male-centric focus that publishing and writing had a lot in the early years. That's not necessarily John Updike's fault, but to me, that's part of the difficulty of getting around to it. So will I, I'm going to read these books, but it's been a process getting to the point where I'm ready to do it. They're part of my Pulitzer Prize project, and like I said, I feel like I can't call myself a well-rounded reader without at least trying them and allowing myself to have an opinion based on experience. And we'll see how that goes. Prompt number 5. W is for what's the title? A book with at least 2 W's in the title. Bonus points for more than 2. I really tried to find one with. Well, I didn't really try. I did this for I looked for maybe 5 minutes, and really only looked through my library, not the internet. And I could only find books that had 2 W's. So I'm just going to go with one of those. There were several, but I'm going with We Were the Mulvaneys by Joyce Carol Oates. Joyce Carol Oates, somebody who is talked about a lot on BookTube. I have read a couple of her books. I've read Blackwater, Zombie. Is that it? That might be it. And I've always wanted to read more of her books. Blonde is on my TBR. We Were the Mulvaneys is on my TBR. Them and a lot of her other books are... I've heard really great things, and this is one of the ones that is on my TBR. It was blessed by Oprah, as you can see from the cover. And I've heard it's not a happy book, but such is life. And, I'm looking forward to getting around to this at some point. So there you go. 2 W's. We Were the Mulvaneys. I'm going to have to review some of these older videos in this series to see if anybody found one with more than 2. I'm sure somebody did. Like I said, I only looked in my own library. So, prompt number 6. W is for Women, a great book you've read recently by a female. Well, my favorite book of the year so far is Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison because she is the grandmaster. Look at how gorgeous she is. Just love her. And this book is so good. It is so good. I can't even... Oh my God, I did this as a buddy read with Amelia Reeds, and God, it was so good. It's just, I can't talk. It's staggering how much she does with this book. And the writing, it's so good. I read this in January, and honestly, I can't see anything surpassing this as to become my favorite book of the year. I think it's got it locked, but we'll see. And we're only in April, but it's going to be really hard for anything to challenge this. It's such a good book. If you have not read Song of Solomon, please get around to it. It's so good, so good. Oh my God, Toni Morrison. Prompt number 7. W is for word, one you encountered recently in your reading that was new to you and or your favorite word. Well, I can't really recall any word that I encountered recently and had to look up or learned about. So I'm just going to talk about my 2 favorite words, or two words I used to use a lot, especially when I was in school, because they were kind of buzzwords I used to love to fit in 2 papers. Obfuscate and specious. They're fun to say too. Try it. Obfuscate and specious. I love them. Prompt number 8. W is for weary, a theme, plot twist, and or cliche you are getting damn tired of. I've talked about this a lot lately, but I've been really struggling with mystery thrillers, so I'm just going to go with the entire mystery thriller genre. And I think a lot of this has to do with what the mystery thriller genre has become after Gone Girl. I had this awakening recently, and I know I've talked about it in a video, so if you're hearing this again, I apologize. But basically, it feels like everything has become dependent on a twist and tricking you. And it's so obvious, and it's so try-hard. And the whole unreliable narrator who's like an alcoholic. And I don't like books that a lot of the time, a twist will depend on the author deliberately misinforming you about something, and it usually doesn't make sense, and I really don't like it. I just don't like it. So I've been struggling with mystery thrillers a lot for a while now, and that's absolutely what I'm going to go with for this prompt. Prompt number 9, W is for whippersnapper, a writer who writes or wrote shockingly well at such a young age. Well, for the BookTube Prize, I read Frankenstein for round 1, and that's by Jeanette Winterson. But because I read Frankenstein, I was reminded that Mary Shelley was only about 19 or 20 when she wrote Frankenstein. So, I am going with Mary Shelley and Frankenstein. 19 or 20, and she wrote a book that has lasted for, oh my god, it's still a classic today. They've made how many movies based on it? And TV shows, stage plays. 19 or 20. Way to go, Mary Shelley. I was not so talented when I was 19 or 20, that's for sure. And prompt number 10. W is for weakest link. A book in a series or in a favorite author's oeuvre that wasn't nearly as good as all the others. I know I've been rereading the Sue Grafton books. I know there are weaker books in that series. I think D is for Deadbeat was the last one that I read and or reread, and it was weaker than the others. However, I'm not going to go with the series because I was just kind of, oddly, the thing that jumped to me first was Jeffrey Eugenides, because you got that out with an author and one of the books that is not nearly as good as all the others. So there's The Virgin Suicides, Middlesex, The Marriage Plot, and Fresh Complaint. I did not like one of these. I have not read Fresh Complaint, which is a collection of short stories. So let's take that one off the table right now. Can you guess which one I didn't like? It's The Marriage Plot. I didn't like it. I don't know why I did this as if it was a game show with you guessing, but, you know, hey, it was fun for me. So, The Marriage Plot is also signed, by the way. He did an event where he interviewed Jennifer Egan, and Jennifer Egan interviewed him at the 92nd Street Y in New York City. What was interesting was that he was talking about his books. Fresh Complaint had not been published at that point, but I can see how it fits into this. He talked about his books that he had written at that time. When he wrote The Virgin Suicides, he was playing with the idea of voice, because the narrators, it's like a collective group of people. It's a first-person plural narration, and he was really playing with that. These boys who grew up with the Lisbon sisters and were reflecting on them and their lives and deaths. So he was really playing with the idea of voice when he wrote The Virgin Suicides. He wanted to play with narrative when he wrote Middlesex, which plays with the idea of Greek epics, telling a multi-generational story that led to the existence of Calliope, who is, at the time this was published, Calliope, who later is known as Cal, is a hermaphrodite. Now we would call Cal intersex. I really want to reread this book to see if it becomes problematic with all that has changed in our understanding of these things in the time since. But he wanted to play with narrative, so he played with voice in The Virgin Suicides, narrative with Middlesex, and he really wanted to play with character when he wrote The Marriage Plot and motivation. And I don't think he does it in any interesting way, to be honest. So it's kind of a really tried and true and familiar storyline. I don't think he does anything interesting with it. I think a lot of elements in The Marriage Plot feel like been there, done that. It's very familiar. And the characters aren't that great, which is really disappointing. So I would say I love Middlesex, and pending a reread, I love Middlesex, and I love The Virgin Suicides. This one is a big old clunker. But I can see where Fresh Complaint fits into that, because it's a collection of short stories, which he had not done before. So you can see with every book that he's written, he has played with some kind of approach to it. And I think that's interesting. However, The Marriage Plot just did not work for me. So there you go. 11, W is for whosoever, tag wantonly. I'm going to do my standard cop-out. I'm not going to tag anybody. If you want to do this, do it. I'm doing it months after it started. So you have no excuse at all whatsoever. There's a W word for you. So if you want to do it, do it. And again, I will link Sean's video down below. I will, and I might, if I'm feeling full of moxie, I might put some of the other videos in this series down below as well. So, as always, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and especially if you've made it all the way to the end, and if you're a subscriber, you're the best. If not, I hope you enjoyed this enough to follow along on whatever it is I do here. And as always, I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.